Scribble notes when I wrote these quotes. If I offend, pardon me, there's more of me to grow. Creative in my process, enjoy the show. The will is different when you recognize the different strokes. Different folks, same goals, we all want the most. So when we reach the top, we can enjoy the toast. The type of bread we get is fresh about the bakery. Told them don't play with me, with or without a degree. Don't question my intensity, bravery. Similar to agencies that want to see you fold. So just pray for me. Yeah, Einstein with my energy.
Welcome to the Scribbled Notes podcast. I'm hyped to have you on. How you doing?
Hey, I'm not bad.
Hey, why don't you introduce yourself for the listeners, people who don't know who you are?
Yeah, my name is Paul Williams. I'm an indie author. You can find me on Instagram at paulwilliams_books. I write fantasy and supernatural.
Hey, so you're an author. How'd you get into the writing space? I've heard a lot of different stories about how people have broken in and what made them want to be authors, especially because, as you know, it's not an easy path, especially indie publishing.
Yeah. Well, I was a fan of reading since like elementary school. I got into like the Percy Jackson series and eventually like Harry Potter. So I was really into like fantasy growing up. And when I was like 13, I was bored one day at home. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna write a book. Because I tried a couple times when I was 8 years old, but I stopped and I was like, you know, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be like the world's youngest author. That didn't happen. But I did publish when I was 17, my first book. I went indie publishing because traditional publishing I thought would take more time than I wanted. And I figured, you know, I had the ability to indie publish. And, you know, I just started to step into it and see how it worked. So here I am a couple books later, still going at it.
Hey, so what have you learned since that first book? I bet it looks very different now than it did that first time you published earlier.
Definitely. I learned to take my time. I'm still trying to like go back and like, I don't know, change my approach to marketing and putting the book together. I'm still learning, like, changing my process up, experimenting with different avenues. It's always evolving.
Yeah, I think one thing I've definitely learned, my first book I published earlier this year. We're still in 2021 for anyone listening in 2022. Yeah, I published, and I think the first book was definitely an experiment. I'd really call it that. It was testing and learning and doing all sorts of stuff for the first time, seeing what was going to stick, basically. And the second book, I would definitely say, I published back in October 2021. That book was for sure a lot smoother in terms of what I was able to release because I had so much context already. And I could only imagine being someone that has a third book already published, that like you're definitely continuing to kind of refine what that looks like.
Definitely. Yeah, it just takes a lot of time, and yeah, you said refining it is a very good word to use.
So what does your process look like as far as publishing goes? So you're indie publishing. Do you publish on multiple platforms? Are you only published on KDP? And then what's the decision-making process behind however you go?
Well, I'm on Amazon and KDP for now, but I know that I'm on other platforms because I think there's like an option on KDP where you can publish on multiple spaces. So I know like I have a book in Barnes & Noble, the website. I think that's how it is for all the ones I've done so far. I really need to like learn more about it instead of being so unsure. But yeah, so as soon as the book is done and edited, I had it formatted last time, but I think I'm going to try and do it myself this time and learn InDesign and all that. I might still have the cover done professionally. And then after all that's wrapped up, I just go to KDP, make sure everything's good, put it on there. I know there's more platforms you can publish like independently with. I know Ingram Spark, they let you do hardcovers. And some people do that and Amazon at the same time, which, you know, you get a hardcover and a paperback copy. So I want to try that eventually, but I heard it's difficult to format the hardcovers. but that's something I definitely want to look into. Just it'd be cool just for me. And then after that, just go into like marketing. Even though you start really early with like announcing the book and building it up. But once it's published, I really start to like try to push it a little bit more.
Yeah, so I definitely feel the hardcover piece, because I'm still looking at doing like a hardcover run of my books. I saw on Amazon now, when I published my latest one, that they created the option to make a hardcover on Amazon on KDP, which I thought was really cool, because that's like, it's a free option. But I haven't done it yet, so I'm interested to see one what the reviews are on it, because I've been looking at some videos on YouTube and some unboxings and stuff to see how people what people are thinking about the quality of it. But I definitely think that's something I want to do. I have a trilogy that I'm writing, and as I'm getting to the last of the last book, I'm like, all right, when I finish the last one, I come up with the whole hardcover set as another piece. I think marketing wise, right? What have you found works? What have you found doesn't work? I've put a ton of freaking money into marketing, and some of it obviously ends up being dead money that doesn't go anywhere.
Exactly.
But like testing, like what have you seen works well for marketing? What's been your strategy?
So this last book I published, it's actually interesting. I looked into this company that helps authors with marketing, and I had like a lot of extra money that like I hadn't expected from the COVID relief funds, because I was laid off of my job, and like not laid off, but COVID, and you had to like stay home.
Yeah.
So I didn't have anything to particularly use it for. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot. And I spent a little bit more than I want to say on this place. I don't know if I would do it again, but I did get results with them. It was a pretty interesting process, because the lady that I was like connected with, she had worked in news media, and she gave me this whole spreadsheet of these bloggers and these other places, and I got a few websites to review my book, and then I'm still following up on a couple of them. It was pretty successful overall. It was pretty interesting, but I think the main thing I learned is that I have the ability to reach out to all these places on my own. She gave me some of the tools to work with that I think I can implement into the future, instead of kind of blowing all my money and praying really hard.
Yeah, I think that's like a major key though, because even me, like I was thinking the same thing, like having a list of people to go to or places to go to as like a resource is like huge, because you never really beforehand. I feel like especially as an indie published author, you're kind of on your own when it comes to figuring out the marketing space. Like you have to become all of a sudden go from author hat, where I'm like publishing a book for the first time, or this is the third book I'm writing, so I'm getting better at the craft, to okay, now I'm gonna be the person that kind of puts the whole thing together and edits and is the lead designer of the whatever, and I have to make decisions about the cover, to all of a sudden like, yo, now I'm the lead marketer too. Like I gotta figure out how we're gonna
all
get
these
this book to other
different,
people.
totally different hats.
Yeah, so I think that having that resource is really helpful in understanding how to use that. And I think what you said real fast was really important too, to just highlight, like you like learn that you have the ability to do it yourself, that like you can reach out to these people. And I think anyone that's listening could kind of take something away from that. Like it really is like something that you are more than capable of doing.
Yeah, and it took me a lot of money to realize that. But that's not to say, it did help, but it's a lesson I had to learn somehow, one way.
What's some of the other lessons you learned through this publishing process, as you're looking at next future projects? What are some lessons that you're taking with you?
Definitely concerning marketing, talking about it early as I can. ARC reviews, getting those copies ahead of time, sending them out. Definitely putting together like packages and like actually mailing them, doing promotional stuff in that sense. In terms of publishing, I don't know if I'm going to look into different avenues now. I'm probably still going to go with KDP. I didn't know that they had themselves a back.
Yeah,
And
they literally just dropped it in October.
October.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look at that. So now I won't have to go through two different avenues, you know?
Yep, that's exactly what I thought.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm not the kind of person who makes plans ahead of time, if that wasn't clear. I definitely feel it out as I go. But I'm learning a lot from other people in the social media sphere of indie publishing, you know, as they go through it. You know, we're learning together, we're bouncing ideas off each other, even if it's not directly, you know, we're seeing what we're doing and we're refining it.
Yeah, I think that's important too. Especially as an indie published author, you're never really alone unless you kind of silo yourself. Like you are connected to all the rest of the publishing world, and there's all these authors that are publishing together. And I've actually even learned more. I've learned more from indie published authors and traditional published authors about just marketing in the process, because it's more the same than it is different. Everyone's doing the same type of work. It's just trying to figure out what works best for you and your audience, how to grow a following organically. I found it is like super difficult. Because you really want fans of what you're doing to follow you. You want fans to be a part of the journey. You want to make a network. You want to be able to connect with people. But then again, you can be just marketing to the same folks. So like you have to balance how much of it is the same people getting the same message, and how much of it is like me adding value to the space, which I feel like I've been trying to learn more so than anything else. Like, how do I add value to other authors?
Yeah, and definitely one of the things I've been thinking about that's really helped me is kind of putting my position in perspective. Because like I'm a single person, like a human being who has all this other stuff in the world going on. I can't expect myself to, you know, sell 100 books on the first day, you know, or run 8 different social media accounts at the same time. Like I've got to take it slowly and like kind of like crawl towards a stable foundation for, you know, this platform, like having an actual platform like newsletters, websites, all that stuff. You know, because before I was thinking like I've got to do this, I've got to do that, and it gets overwhelming. So it's important to make sure you remember who you are, and you know, you're not a big publishing house.
Yeah, and I think a lot of indie authors especially feel the pressure to perform like one, and it's almost like, don't think that you're a publishing house. You're one person. Like you're just trying to figure this out. So taking time to be deliberate, is kind of what you're saying, which I think is important. Like I think taking time to build on steps and understanding that like your first launch is not going to be nearly as successful as maybe your second, third, fourth, or sixth, seventh book down the line, when you have all these resources and connections and you know all the stuff. It's like it's incredible what happens when you have connections. And as you learn more, because every book you're just a little bit further in the progression. So it's like at some point you're just going to be so far along that it's just second nature to contact this person, reach out to this person, get a review from here. I found myself doing that the second book, like, oh, let me send the arc over here to this person that's reviewed it once before. Like, oh, let me reach out to this person, see if they want to get an arc. Like I wasn't doing that the first time because I was like barely knowing what an arc was.
Yeah,
like,
right.
So it's like a learning process.
It's definitely like a crawl, like you're making this net of connections over time.
Where have you been getting most of your knowledge, information, and stuff? I feel like I haven't asked anybody, like, where are they getting information too?
Well, I stay on Instagram mainly. That's where I am. I go on YouTube. I used to look up like a lot of different like writing YouTube videos. I don't really do that as much anymore, but I probably should. It just feels like a lot of them get really gimmicky, and it's just like I have to stick through it. And some of it is information you already know, so you just like speed through it. But I do have a writing group in real life. I was about to say IRL. It's at a library. You know, we bounce ideas, and they have like little meetings and signings at their library. So yeah, just a lot of little places here and there.
Yeah, that's all super helpful because honestly, I haven't met any like I haven't had any writing groups in real life, which is interesting. Like every group I've been a part of has been online. So I wish I had one in person where I could just
A lot of the writing groups in person, especially at libraries, are going to be like older people. But there's still some people who are like pretty knowledgeable about the whole process and everything.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. I might have to look into that. I think anytime you can connect people, it just helps.
Yeah.
I know online I've run into a ton of people in like the writing community and all types of other spaces where they're giving out advice. I definitely agree. Like I was a huge person who was looking up YouTube videos when I first started writing. Everybody's videos on like different types of styles and different ways to do whatever. Like I was watching every video, and now I feel like it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody like Alexa Dunn and all of them. I was like watching all their videos, and I learned a ton. But then you like hit the point where everyone's content is pretty much the same. So you're
Right.
like almost, yeah, you're like listening to the same message. And then after you like actually publish a couple books, it becomes a lot harder to be like, okay, I'm going to go back and listen to them talk about writing when you're like, I've done it now.
Yeah.
And I've learned a lot from my first one. I'm learning from my second one. I feel like I'm starting to get a hang of this.
Yeah.
So when you're writing, what's your process? Are you a plotter? Are you a planner? Are you a pantser? What's that look like for you, and how has that been working?
I'm a little bit of everything. I think you'll get that answer from a lot of authors, but I really go by like George R. R. Martin was one of my favorite authors. It feels kind of tacky to say almost in a fantasy genre. It's so popular, but
hey,
I really do. Yeah, I really do love his books. And he goes like gardener or like architect. And I think I'm definitely more of a gardener than I am an architect in sort of like building things. Because like before I started this first book, I was like, I want to get, because I'm writing a trilogy too. It's a fantasy. So I was like, I want to make sure I know everything about the world, everything about the characters before I start. But then I was like halfway and I was like, okay, I think I'm ready. Like, I think I'm ready to start writing. So then I started, and then it grows from there more and more and more. And I'm still learning more about the world after this first book is, almost done. And I'm getting the second one. I'm like, oh, so this is why this happens. And I'm going back and I'm revising it. So, yeah.
So talk to me about your book. Like what's it about? What's the premise? Like let's take a little deep dive into the story.
Well, I think the basic idea started with one of the main seeds was like, I'm not religious, but I grew up in a like very Christian kind of house. And my first thought was like, what if Jesus was like more self-serving, not like evil, but like, what if he was more like a politician or like something like that? He was using this power for his supporters and for himself. And the second idea was like, what if you could create heaven yourself? And then I put the setting in like a more Roman Greek sort of place, kind of like the era of, the slow rise of Christianity while they were being persecuted. And then I took influence from a lot of Mediterranean cultures. I know I have a character that's from the equivalent of like Egypt. I made a whole map. I made a list of all the cultures. I did research. Yeah, I had this whole book full of it, and now I'm trying to make another like binder. I wish I had it with me, full of like art and like more like readable notes, legible. And I have another character that's from like basically a different dimension, and it's more like she comes from like a steampunk kind of world, and she doesn't know like how she got over to this one. And she's inspired by like there are these sea people that nobody knows where they came from in actual history that came to Egypt and like pillaged. So that's where they were inspired of, like, but instead of the sea, it's from the sky. And a lot of this I was writing like while I was in like college history classes. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm gonna take some of this.
Yeah, take some of these concepts.
Yeah. I took from US history too, and it's like I'm learning about the actual world while I'm doing it, like how banks were formed first and all this stuff. So it's actually kind of practical. But yeah, that's where it started from.
How has it grown since your first novel? I feel like I'm also writing a series, and I'm writing the third book in the trilogy now. And whenever I read the first book, I'm like, I would have never guessed it's going where it ended up. even though I kind of had this plan, I'm like, the
Yeah.
world is so much bigger than I ever expected.
Well, I'm just starting on writing the first draft of the second one. So I'm starting to get to that point where I'm like, okay, yeah, this is evolving a little bit more than what I thought. But my general idea, I'd say I'm sticking pretty close to it because I want to make sure it's like a tight kind of series. I don't want to go too wild and like never finish it. George R. R. Martin. Yeah, that's one thing I don't want to replicate of his. But it's definitely it's changing and evolving as I go. The characters are surprising me a little bit, but I'm trying to stick to the outline.
So what's been the most interesting part of writing the story? Like how do you come up with your plot? How do you develop that? How do you develop your plot? Like what is that first book? Start to finish, what does that look like?
Well, originally I had like vague ideas. I kind of labeled the characters as like different things. Like when I called like the reporter, and I had like he was gonna go to these like noble houses and interview them. And another one was like, oh, she's like the invading person. And then the other character was like evil Jesus. But then from there, I like plotted out where there would be per chapter. So I was like, in this chapter, I want this bullet point, this bullet point, this bullet point. And then I was writing it, it would sort of evolve. But I kind of outlined a set amount of chapters for each of them ahead of time, so that but like when I was writing it itself, different things would happen while I was actually writing it. So I had a skeleton and then it grew.
Yeah, I find myself very similar to that. When I outline books, I'm like, I have an idea of how many chapters the character should get based off of what story or narrative line or narrative thread they have. And then you know how it goes. It just becomes they start to do more than what you're expecting. So then sometimes they get another chapter or two.
Yeah.
So I try to keep my stories tight. Also because I like my stories. I like a lot of books, at least the ones I read the most. They're very concise. I'm not a huge fan. I'm a huge fantasy fan. I hate big books. I hate thick books because they're super daunting to me. And I have a hard time finishing books that are super long, even though my first fantasy book was like The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. It was like super freaking long, but I was just like, I'll try it. I did an audio book, so also helped.
Yeah. Something that I found was like I don't like longer chapters because I'll like stop in the middle of them and then I'll get annoyed or whatever. So like when I write it shorter chapters, and when I read, I found that I prefer like just a couple of pages. So I'm reading Dune right now, and I'm really appreciating that like it's very like short little chapters, so I can like kind of breeze through it and stop when I want to at a comfortable place instead of in the middle.
Yeah, instead of in the middle of a chapter. I've definitely noticed that like some stories, some authors have very interesting like structure. I read Elantris the other like couple months ago, me and my wife, and it was super interesting because it's structured in a way where like chapters just kind of stop like in different spots. It's like, oh, just boom, we're gonna move on to the next character. I love multiple character perspectives, so like I'm a very like I need more than one character in my story that we follow. When I'm writing, it's the same way. I look at just structuring chapters to kind of give you more. I've also explored doing some other techniques because I've noticed in some of the writing I really enjoy, they'll do prologues, epilogues, but they also do like interludes and like other little things sprinkled throughout. Brandon Sanderson does it a ton in his books, and I've really enjoyed the change of pace that he does. Like he'll have like an interlude during the middle of the book, and it'll just be a perspective from a character that literally is just showing up right now for this one moment, or as we think it's just that one moment, because he'll like bring them back later in a different book. But it's just super fun. Like you get this abstract, you get this like small piece that's outside of the narrative storyline. And I was able to do it in my second book, and a lot of people really enjoyed it because it just tricked them for a little bit.
Yeah.
It's just like a very much change of pace. And I remember like in my second book, we have there's this plot line that's running through. That's very much in the background. It's in the prologue. You see it as to what's happening to this basically this religion or this cult of people. And it happens in the prologue, stops right after that. You move on to our main cast of characters. They go through their adventure. And then that prologue, that this whole crazy thing happening is slowly weaved and uncovered to the characters. But the reader has already seen it live firsthand through prologue. Then in the interlude, it's like brought to the surface once more because you get so swept up inside the plot in the middle of the book that it's easy to forget how crazy the prologue was so long ago. So then interlude like kind of reintroduces it, reestablishes it right before we reach that second half and that ending. And it really was just a fun thing to do. It was like 3 pages in total.
Yeah.
But people were just like, what? I completely forgot that this was even so bad over there. And then it just sets up the ending. But it was just fun. I think being able to kind of play with structure has been something I've explored a little bit more. One of my favorite books back in the day was Looking for Alaska by John Green.
Yeah.
And like a high school freaking favorite book for a bunch of schools. But he does like 2 parts. He has like a bunch of his chapters are the before, and then he has the after chapters. And it's just after the incident, all the chapters after that are just this whole different sort of book, even tone wise. And I thought that was always really cool.
There's definitely a lot of space in like self-publishing, to play around with that structure and to kind of experiment a little more than it would take with traditional. But I definitely do that too with like the prologue and epilogue, introducing things that aren't quite as relevant in the beginning. That definitely, sort of pop up as the story goes on. You connect the dots. You're like, oh, I really love like complex plots and subtext and all that stuff.
Yeah, and that's what makes a story a story. At the end of the day, it's like you really, as a reader, you're kind of looking forward to all of the different aspects and the different angles. What's feedback been like to you from readers and people who've taken in your book, ARC readers and such?
Well, from the last reviewers of my last book, I only got one star review, and that one said it has great prose. And I'm like, oh, if the 1-star review says I have great prose, then I'm good. If that's the worst,
must be killing it.
Most people do like it. They do say that I have really good like description writing and stuff like that, which kind of psychs you out a little bit when you're writing, because like, what if this isn't as good? But I try to keep that out of my mind for the most part and just enjoy what I'm writing again. In terms of feedback, I don't know, like mostly it's technical stuff people point out with me, because you can miss that a lot of times when you're writing. It's like, there's supposed to be a period here, there's no period, these aren't commas, and you kind of like carry that as you go into the future. But generally people are pretty just like content with my stories, and they want to read more. Hey,
that's the kind of feedback you want, honestly. Like it's always nice to get like positive reception. I think in general, like I haven't run into like yet for myself people who are like overtly mean. I don't think readers are necessarily as mean as they almost seem. I think readers are much harsher on like big commercial published stories. I think they're way more harsh on those bigger.
Sometimes for fun, I just go to like Goodreads and like go to the worst reviewed books and just read them.
Yeah. I mean, just look at Harry Potter. If you look at any of the Harry Potter books, they'll get terrible reviews, even though it's like a super well-known series. And we all know they're great books, but there's people who will just really bash them. So I haven't felt that from my end, which I'm really happy about, because I don't know how to respond.
Yeah, a lot of times on Goodreads, I think, because I've heard the platform is like kind of like messy and unstructured, and there's a lot of chances for like people to abuse the system. So I've heard a couple like horror stories of authors getting like bombed with like bad reviews just for no reason. but that hasn't happened to me. But yeah, I hope it doesn't in the future, cross my fingers.
So where can people connect with you online? Where can they buy your books?
Yeah, people can connect with me mostly on Instagram. I am on Goodreads, Paul C. Williams. My latest book is called The Shadow of Hades. It's available on KDP, Amazon, Kindle Direct. Search The Shadow of Hades, Paul C. Williams. It should pop up. There's a couple of reviews out. Yeah, that's the main place, the main hub to find me is Instagram, Paul Williams _books. And all my links are under there for now, but I'm definitely revamping it at the moment.
So what are you working on in the future? What's up next?
Yeah, when I get this trilogy out, I don't know, maybe it'll be a couple of years. We'll see where I'm at there. It's we'll see.
We'll see. Well, I want to say thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for making some time. Definitely really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's pretty fun.
Of course. Now, this has been an episode of Scribble Notes. You already know what it is. Peace out.
Scribble notes when I wrote these quotes. If I offend, pardon me, there's more of me to grow. Creative in my process, enjoy the show. The will is different when you recognize the different strokes. Different folks, same goals, we all want the most. So when we reach the top, we can enjoy the toast. The type of bread we get is fresh about the bakery. Told them don't play with me, with or without a degree, don't question my intensity. Bravery, similar to agencies that want to see you fall. So just pray for me. Yeah, Einstein with my